The wind howled softly across the endless plains of Verdanis IV, a green world covered in tall blue grass and glowing trees that swayed beneath twin moons. It was not Earth, but to one human named Elias Ward, it had slowly begun to feel like home. He had been living there for almost 3 years as part of the Frontier Peace Corps, a group sent to explore and help new colonies survive among alien ecosystems. His days were quiet, filled with cataloging plants, repairing survey drones, and sending small updates back to the orbital station. He liked the silence. It reminded him of his home mountains back on Earth. But that night, silence was broken. A faint cry echoed through the forest behind his outpost, high-pitched, desperate, and full of fear. Elias froze, holding his flashlight toward the dark grove. It didn't sound human. It was too sharp, too wild. He thought maybe it was one of the planet's native animals in distress. Normally, he would stay back. Protocol demanded that humans avoid unnecessary contact with local fauna, but something in that cry. It sounded like a child, small and terrified. Without thinking, he grabbed his light rifle, wrapped his jacket around himself, and went out into the cold night. The alien forest shimmered with faint light from the trees, their branches covered with tiny orbs that glowed like fireflies. The ground crunched under his boots, soft and spongy. He followed the sound until he reached a shallow ravine. There, tangled in some kind of sticky vine, was a small creature. It looked like a cub, fur the color of sunset, eyes bright gold, claws tiny but sharp. Its breathing was uneven. The vines had wrapped around its neck and legs, and it struggled weakly. Elias's heart pounded. The creature was clearly in pain. He had seen holograms of this species before in his field notes. It was a Tigran cub, belonging to a native apex predator species known for their strength and intelligence. Adult Tigrans were dangerous, almost lion-sized, with striped coats and sharp tusks. But this cub, it was just a baby. Elias hesitated for only a moment. He lowered his rifle and carefully moved closer. The cub hissed weakly, trying to swipe at him with its tiny paw. "Easy there," he whispered softly. "I'm not here to hurt you." His voice was calm and low, the same tone he used when helping injured animals back on Earth. He pulled out a small cutting tool and started slicing the sticky vines one by one. The cub whimpered as the last one snapped free. When Elias lifted it up, he felt its trembling body pressed against his gloves. Its heart was beating fast and its eyes, full of confusion, locked onto his. "You're okay now," he murmured. "You're safe." He wrapped it in his jacket to keep it warm. He knew this was a bad idea. Every guidebook warned that touching local predators could provoke attacks from adults nearby. But he couldn't leave it to die. The cub's life mattered to him in a way he couldn't fully explain. Maybe it was his humanity, the part that refused to ignore a creature in pain. He returned to his small outpost and placed the cub on a heating pad near the med station. It was weak and dehydrated, so he gave it a few drops of nutrient solution through a syringe. For the next few hours he stayed awake, monitoring it, cleaning its wounds and whispering softly to keep it calm. When dawn came, the cub was breathing steadily, its golden eyes half closed in sleep. That morning, Elias sent a coded message to his superior officer orbiting above the planet. He didn't say much, just that he found an injured local life form and was conducting a short recovery observation. He didn't mention it was a Tigran cub. That would have brought a recall order instantly. By the second day, the cub was already stronger. It tried to walk around the medroom, sniffing the air curiously. It made small chirping sounds that almost sounded like laughter. Elias couldn't help smiling. He named it Sola, after the smaller of the twin moons. They grew attached quickly. The cub followed him everywhere, sleeping near his boots, playing with spare wires, and sometimes curling on his lap when he worked. Elias never imagined he'd feel so connected to an alien creature. He knew it was temporary. As soon as the cub could survive on its own, he would have to release it back into the wild. But part of him didn't want that day to come. One evening, while Elias was scanning plant samples outside, Sola suddenly stiffened. Its ears flattened and a low growl rumbled from its chest. Elias turned around quickly. The forest behind the outpost was unnaturally silent. Then he heard it, a deep guttural roar that made his bones vibrate. The air itself seemed to tremble. He realized instantly what it was. The mother, a full-grown Tigran tigress. Elias's pulse quickened. He knew from data records that Tigran adults were fiercely protective of their young. If she found him near her cub, she would attack without hesitation. He quickly backed toward the outpost, trying not to make any sudden movements. Sola started chirping loudly, maybe recognizing the familiar voice of its mother. Moments later, the Tigress appeared. She was massive, muscles rippling beneath her orange-striped fur, eyes burning like molten amber. Her fangs were long, glinting under the moonlight. She stepped out of the shadows, tail lashing slowly. Elias stood frozen. His weapon lay on the table behind him, but he knew using it would be suicide. The Tigress's gaze moved from him to the cub that ran toward her. Sola stumbled halfway, still weak, and cried out. The Tigress's roar shook the air again. Elias thought it was over. He braced himself for the strike, but something unexpected happened. Instead of attacking, the Tigress stopped. Her sharp eyes studied Elias carefully. She sniffed the air and then lowered her head to the cub. Sola rubbed against her leg, mewling happily. The Tigress nuzzled the cub, inspecting it from head to tail. Then she turned back toward Elias. Her muscles tensed, but her expression wasn't rage, it was something else. Caution, maybe confusion. She stepped closer, one paw at a time, until she was only a few meters away. Elias held his breath. He didn't move. The Tigress sniffed the ground near his boots, then lifted her head toward him. For a long, tense moment, they stared at each other. Two living beings from different worlds, predator and human, locked in silent understanding. Then she made a soft sound, almost like a sigh, and turned back to her cub. Elias felt his knees weaken with relief. He stepped back slowly, giving her space. He thought she would take the cub and leave, disappearing back into the forest. But she didn't. Instead, she lay down right outside his outpost, curling around her cub protectively. Her golden eyes stayed open, watching Elias through the transparent wall. That night, Elias couldn't sleep. Every sound outside reminded him that a predator was only meters away. Yet strangely, he didn't feel afraid. Deep inside, he felt something different, respect. The Tigress wasn't his enemy. She was a mother, guarding her young, just like any mother on Earth would. As the moons rose higher, he looked through the window and saw Sola resting against the Tigress's chest. The cub looked peaceful. The Tigress lifted her gaze toward Elias for a moment, and he thought he saw something soft in her eyes, something like gratitude. From that night on, she never left. Every day when Elias stepped outside to work, she watched from a distance. When strange sounds came from the woods, she growled softly, warning him of danger. And though Elias knew she could end his life in seconds if she wished, somehow he felt safer than ever before. He had saved her cub. And now it seemed she had chosen to protect him. Days turned into weeks, and life at the outpost was no longer the same for Elias Ward. What had once been a quiet and lonely station had now become a strange triangle of trust between man, cub, and Tigress. The mother still stayed close to his outpost every night. She never entered, never tried to attack, but she was always there, watching, guarding, waiting. Elias had learned to move slowly when she was nearby. The first few days were full of tension. Every sound made him jump. The Tigress would growl if he came too close to her cub, and he would stop, raise his hands, and speak softly. Over time, she began to understand that he meant no harm. Sometimes, when he brought out water to clean equipment, the cub, Sola, would run forward, chirping and rolling in the dirt near him. The Tigress would watch closely but wouldn't move. Elias could sense that something fragile was forming between them, something like respect. The colony command station above the planet still had no idea what was happening down here. Elias sent his regular reports, careful to keep things vague. He wrote about weather conditions, soil data, and plant growth, but he never mentioned the Tigress or her cub. If command knew, they would send armed patrols, maybe even capture the creatures for study. Elias couldn't let that happen. He had seen enough of human fear when it came to alien life. One afternoon, while collecting samples near the ridge, Elias noticed that the Tigress followed him at a distance. She moved quietly, her body blending perfectly into the alien forest. It was as if she was his shadow. When he stopped, she stopped. When he walked again, she followed. He found it strange but comforting. Suddenly, his wrist scanner beeped, a signal from one of the perimeter drones. Something large was moving from the western plains, fast. Elias frowned. He checked the readings. The energy signature didn't match any known Tigran creature. It was mechanical. A moment later, the sky above the trees flashed. A small shuttle descended, throwing dust into the air. Elias's heart sank. The Peace Corps didn't schedule any visits this week. That meant one thing: an unscheduled survey or maybe a mining scout team. He ran back to the outpost as fast as he could. The Tigress, sensing danger, bounded after him with long, silent leaps. When he reached the clearing, the shuttle had already landed near the forest edge. 2 armored men stepped out, scanning the ground with bright lights. "Frontier Survey Unit," one of them called out through a voice speaker. "Identify yourself." Elias raised his hands and walked out of the shadows. "Elias Ward, Peace Corps biologist, Station 17, he replied, trying to sound calm. "This area is under civilian observation." The taller man removed his helmet. "We received strange readings here. Something big's been moving near your zone. You seen anything?" Elias hesitated. His eyes flicked to the forest behind him, where he knew the Tigress was hiding. "No large activity," he lied. "Just small local fauna. I've been collecting samples." The soldier narrowed his eyes. Our sensors picked up a thermal pattern, 2 big ones. Could be predators." "They're not hostile," Elias said quickly. "You should leave them alone." The other man laughed. "Not hostile?" "Everything on this rock has claws. Command wants all major species tagged and recorded. We're setting up traps." Elias's stomach turned cold. He knew what tagged meant. Once the traps captured them, the creatures would be shipped to orbit for study or worse, dissected. He couldn't let that happen to Sola and her mother. As the soldiers walked toward the forest, Elias felt panic rise inside him. He took a step forward. "Wait," he said. "You can't just enter there. It's a protected region under Bio-Class 2 restrictions." "Command overrules that," the leader said without looking back. "Stay in your station, civilian." Elias clenched his fists. He knew they wouldn't listen. He turned toward the trees, hoping the Tigress stayed hidden. But a low growl came from the dark, deep and powerful. The soldiers froze. "What was that?" one muttered, raising his rifle. Then the Tigress appeared, emerging from the shadows like a living flame, her fur glowing faintly under the blue light. She was enormous, her fangs bared, her golden eyes locked on the intruders. The cub peered from behind her legs, chirping nervously. The soldiers aimed their rifles instantly. "Get back!" the leader shouted. Elias threw himself between them, arms raised. "Don't shoot," he yelled. "She's not attacking." The soldiers hesitated. The Tigress growled again, stepping closer, muscles tense. Elias's heart pounded. He could see fear in the soldiers' eyes, fear that would soon turn into violence. He turned to the Tigress, speaking softly. "Easy, girl. They don't understand. Please, don't." His voice trembled, but he kept it steady. The Tigress's ears flicked. She looked at him, confused but listening. For a moment, everything stood still, the soldiers, the Tigress, Elias. Then one soldier panicked. His weapon fired. A bright energy bolt hit the ground near the Tigress's paw, throwing up dust. She roared, a sound so powerful it shook the air. She lunged forward, claws striking the dirt, but Elias leaped in front again, shouting, "Die, stop! Don't hurt them!" The soldier stumbled back, eyes wide. The Tigress halted, standing protectively in front of Elias. Her massive head lowered, her teeth bared, but she didn't strike. Instead, she made a low rumble that sounded almost like warning rather than rage. Elias looked at the soldiers. "Get back to your ship," he said quietly. "She won't chase you. Just go." The men looked at each other, uncertain. Then the leader nodded slowly. "We're reporting this," he muttered. "Command will send an investigation team." They backed away, weapons still raised, and boarded their shuttle. Within seconds, it lifted off, disappearing into the sky. As the dust settled, Elias turned to the Tigress. She was still growling softly, eyes glowing with protective anger. He raised his hands and spoke gently. "It's okay. They're gone now." She blinked, her muscles slowly relaxing. The cub ran forward and pressed against Elias's leg, purring loudly. The Tigress made a low sound like approval. That night, Elias couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. He knew the soldiers would send reports to command. More people would come, maybe with stronger weapons, maybe with capture drones. The peace he had built here was about to break. He sat by the window, looking out at the Tigress and her cub sleeping near the glowing trees. "You saved me back there," he whispered softly. "You could have torn them apart, but you didn't. You trusted me." The Tigress lifted her head slightly as if she understood. Then she lowered it again, curling her tail around the cub. The next few days were filled with quiet tension. Elias began preparing emergency plans, packing samples, securing files, and setting up diversion signals to confuse incoming drones. He wanted to protect them even if it meant breaking orders. One evening, he noticed something strange. The Tigress wasn't staying near the outpost anymore. She had begun circling the entire valley, watching from different points, marking trees with glowing scratches. It looked like she was expanding her territory, but not for herself. It was as if she was guarding him. That realization hit him harder than he expected. The Tigress had accepted him as part of her world, maybe even as part of her pack. When the sky turned dark with the sound of engines again, a new shuttle descending, Elias already knew what to do. He turned to the Tigress and whispered, "We'll have to protect this place together." The Tigress rumbled softly in response, standing tall beside him. Sola, the cub, sat between them, looking up at the stars, unaware of the danger that was coming. Elias loaded his tools and set up the defense drones, not to kill but to warn. His goal wasn't war. It was survival. He wanted to show his species that humans could protect, not destroy. That night under the twin moons of Verdanus 4, a human and an alien Tigress stood side by side, waiting for whatever came next. Elias no longer felt alone. He had saved her cub once, but now it seemed she was saving him in return. The sound of engines grew louder over the forest of Verdanus 4. Elias Ward stood outside his outpost, feeling the vibration through the soft alien soil. The Tigress stood beside him, her golden eyes fixed on the darkening sky. Her cub, Sola, crouched under her tail, trembling but silent. The air smelled of burned metal and ozone, a smell that always meant trouble. Elias knew this time it wasn't a scouting ship. The large shadows above meant something heavier, a command vessel. That meant his lies were no longer enough. Command had found out. They were coming for him and for the Tigress. He turned to the great creature beside him. "They'll come here soon," he said softly, not knowing if she could understand the words but hoping she felt the tone. "You need to take your cub and go. Hide in the mountains." The Tigress stared at him without moving. She seemed to sense his fear. A low rumble came from her chest, not a growl, but something deeper, almost like disagreement. She stepped closer and brushed her head lightly against his shoulder. Elias froze, hardly believing what she was doing. It was the same gesture he had seen her use to comfort her cub. He whispered, "You don't understand, do you? They'll hurt you if you stay." The Tigress looked at him again and then turned her eyes toward the sky. Her muscles were tense, ready. She wasn't going anywhere. Moments later, the command ship broke through the clouds, landing hard in the clearing with a blast of dust and hot wind. A ramp opened and several armored officers stepped out, carrying shock rifles and scanning equipment. The leader, a woman in a white coat, shouted over the noise, "Elias Ward! Step forward immediately." Elias sighed. He walked forward slowly, keeping his hands visible. "I'm here," he said. "You didn't need to bring an army," the officer frowned. "You've been concealing native predators. Our sensors detected unauthorized bioactivity around your outpost. Explain yourself." Elias looked back at the Tigress and her cub behind him. "They're not a threat," he said firmly. "They're intelligent. They can understand us. I couldn't let the cub die." The woman's voice turned cold. "Your emotional choices are not relevant to protocol. Step aside. We're taking the creatures for containment and study." Elias's stomach twisted. "No, you can't do that." The officer signaled her team. "Stun nets, prepare." At that moment, the Tigress let out a deep roar that rolled through the valley like thunder. The soldiers stopped instantly. Dust lifted from the ground and the leaves of glowing trees shook. The sound carried both warning and promise. She stepped in front of Elias, her body between him and the soldiers. Her tail lashed slowly, eyes bright and fearless. The leader raised her weapon. "If it attacks, shoot to neutralize," Elias shouted. "Wait! Don't hurt her! She's protecting her cub, she's protecting me." No one moved. The tension was so thick it felt like the air itself would break. Then the Tigress took a slow step forward. Her claws dug into the dirt, but she didn't charge. She was waiting. Watching every human movement carefully, the officer hesitated, unsure. "Ward, call it off," she said sharply. "She's not mine to command," Elias replied softly. "She's her own being. She's just defending her family." The officer lowered her weapon slightly, uncertain. "We can't risk the safety of our people." Elias looked around at the soldiers and then pointed to the cub hiding behind its mother. "That's a child. Look at it, it's scared. What does that remind you of? We came here to learn, not to destroy. If you take them, you'll start a war we don't understand. The soldiers glanced at each other, unsure what to do. But before anyone could speak, the sky flickered again. Another ship appeared, sleek and silent, descending like a falling star. Elias frowned in confusion. That wasn't a human design. The command officer shouted, "What now?" The new ship landed at the far edge of the clearing. Its surface shimmered like liquid silver. From the ramp came 3 tall figures covered in light armor made of organic metal. Their faces were feline, their eyes golden. Elias felt his chest tighten. These were not humans. They were Tigrans, the intelligent form of the species the Tigress belonged to. The lead Tigran stepped forward. His voice was deep, translated automatically through a glowing device on his chest. "You have entered sacred land. The mother and cub belong to our kin. Leave this place, humans." The soldiers raised their weapons again, but the officer stopped them. "Identify yourself," she demanded. The Tigran's eyes narrowed. "You do not command here." He looked toward Elias. "You are the one who saved the young." Elias nodded slowly. "Yes, I found the cub trapped." "I only helped." The Tigran's gaze softened slightly. "The mother told us of you. She carries your scent and your name in her memory. You are now under her protection." Elias didn't know what to say. He glanced at the Tigress, who stood tall and calm now, her golden eyes glowing softly. The command officer was growing angry. "This is our research world. These creatures have no legal—" The ground shook with a deep rumble from the Tigress. The Tigran leader raised one clawed hand and the vibration stopped. He turned to the officer. "You speak of law, yet your kind burns worlds. You speak of peace, yet you arrive with weapons. This one," he nodded at Elias, "chose compassion. He has more honor than your fleets." The officer clenched her fists. "We'll report this to High Command. This planet's claim will be contested." "Then contest it," the Tigran said calmly. "But not here, not today." He gave a low growl, and his soldiers aimed sleek crystal weapons that hummed with energy. The human soldiers hesitated. They knew they were outmatched. The officer made a quick gesture, signaling retreat. Within minutes, the command team withdrew, their shuttle lifting off in defeat. The roar of engines faded until the forest was silent again. Elias stood there, trying to catch his breath. The Tigran leader walked toward him. "You have done something rare, human. Few of your kind would risk their life for another species." "I just did what anyone should do," Elias said quietly. "She was only a cub." The Tigran gave a soft, rumbling laugh. "Perhaps. But small acts echo through time." He looked at the Tigress and the cub. "They are safe now. We will take them home." Elias felt a strange ache in his chest. He looked at Sola, who had grown stronger and playful again, and at the Tigress, who had never once left his side since that first night. "So this is goodbye?" he asked softly. The Tigran leader tilted his head. "Goodbye for now. But know this, Elias Ward, the bond between you and the Tigress is not broken. She carries your scent and your courage in her blood memory. You will be remembered among our kind." Elias tried to smile, though it felt heavy. He crouched down, running his hand gently along Sola's head. "Take care of her," he whispered. The cub nuzzled against his glove, chirping softly. The Tigress stepped closer, lowering her head until her eyes met his. For a long moment, neither moved. Then she pressed her forehead gently against his chest, a final gesture of trust. When she stepped back, Elias saw something glowing faintly on her fur. A small patch of light shaped like a human handprint. It shimmered briefly, then faded. The Tigrans guided the mother and cub toward their ship. Elias watched silently as they disappeared inside. The ramp closed, the engines hummed, and soon the ship rose into the glowing sky, vanishing beyond the twin moons. The forest grew quiet again. The wind moved softly through the blue grass. Elias stood there alone, feeling both sorrow and peace. He knew he might never see them again, but he also knew something had changed forever. Weeks later, a message arrived through the Peace Corps relay, an encrypted note that no one could trace. When Elias opened it, the screen showed a hologram of a distant valley filled with glowing trees and crystal water. Standing beside a group of Tigrans was the Tigress, larger and stronger now. The cub Sola had grown into a young hunter. The message voice said, "The Tigress remembers. Our worlds may be different, but our hearts are not. When you look to the stars, remember you have family among them." Elias smiled. For the first time since they left, he felt no loneliness. He stepped outside his outpost, looked up at the night sky, and found the constellation that pointed toward their world. He raised his hand in quiet salute. The wind carried the faint sound of a roar far in the distance, soft and familiar, like a memory that would never fade. On Verdanis 4, one human had proved something powerful, that kindness could cross galaxies, and trust could grow between species that were never meant to meet. He had protected the alien cub, and the Tigress mother had given him something greater in return, her loyalty, her protection, and her eternal friendship that would echo among the stars.